Lily Hart stood just outside the glass doors of the Maple Street Community Center, gripping the straps of her canvas tote until her fingers ached. Through the doors, she could see folding chairs, a long table, microphones, and the familiar faces of neighbors who had watched her bag groceries for years. At the far end, her younger sister Jenna sat straight-backed in a sharp red blazer, arms crossed, jaw tight. In a few minutes, they would spread out a month's worth of receipts like a map of her soul. Every odd purchase, every quiet gift, every bill she had chosen not to pay would be on display. People would talk about money, but Lily knew they were really deciding what kind of person she had been. It still amazed her that all of this had begun with a single phone call on an ordinary Tuesday. Back then, life had been small and heavy and predictable. Sunrise meant coffee in the chipped blue mug, checking her father's pill organizer, then coaxing him into his sweater while he asked the same questions he had asked yesterday. The old house creaked under the weight of unpaid repairs and memories. By 9 o'clock she was at Hart's Market, sliding on her name tag and stepping into the narrow world between conveyor belt and candy rack. That afternoon the store smelled of oranges from the front display and burnt coffee from the pot that never seemed to be fresh. Lily moved on habit, greeting regulars by name, explaining sales, counting out coupons with the easy rhythm of someone who had been taking care of other people for a very long time. "Afternoon, Miss Lily," came the familiar gravelly voice. She looked up and smiled. Howard Green eased his small basket onto the counter. Faded flannel shirt, scuffed shoes, hair sticking up like he had lost a fight with his pillow. His basket held the same things as always: 2 bruised apples, a can of soup, a loaf of bread. "Hi, Mr. Green. You're early today," she said. "Couldn't stand the walls," he muttered. His eyes searched her face. "You look beat." "Dad had one of his nights," Lily answered, sliding his apples into a separate bag. "We're a little short on sleep." He grunted, but it sounded more like worry than annoyance. "You can't keep this up forever, you know." She smiled the way people smile when they have heard the same sentence from too many mouths. "We'll figure it out." When she read him the total, she tapped a key and let a small discount fall off the screen. He pretended not to notice. He left his coins in the donation jar the way he always did, fingers lingering there for a second like he wanted to say something else. Then he just nodded and shuffled away down the aisle. By closing time, she had forgotten that pause. At home, the house hummed with the usual sounds. The evening news turned up too loud in her father's room, the ticking of the clock in the hallway, the soft crackle of the old baseboard heater. She coaxed Walter through his pills and his bedtime story about the factory he used to work at, then sat at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes. Electric, mortgage, clinic, insurance. The numbers blurred together until she turned off the light instead of opening the last one. The phone rang just as she was rinsing the coffee mug. Unknown number. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. Strangers rarely brought good news when you were late on 3 bills. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and answered anyway. "Ms. Lily Hart?" a calm male voice asked. "Yes, this is Lily. My name is Daniel Rowe. I'm an attorney with Rowe and Parker Law. I'm calling about a client of ours, Mr. Howard Green." Lily straightened. "Is he all right?" There was a brief, careful silence. "I'm afraid Mr. Green passed away last night." She leaned against the counter, the dish towel twisting in her hands. She saw him standing at her register, frowning at prices, dropping change into the jar. The thought of that small ritual just ending left an unexpected ache in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He left very specific instructions in his will. the lawyer continued. He named you personally. Mr. Green arranged for a prepaid debit card to be issued in your name in the amount of $100,000. The laugh that escaped her sounded thin and wrong, like it belonged to someone else. I think you have the wrong Lily Hart. I just ring up his groceries. There is no mistake, Daniel said quietly. The card will be yours on one condition. She stared at the dark window over the sink, at the reflection of her tired face, and the hallway behind her. Somewhere down the hall her father began calling her name. What condition? She asked. You must spend it, he said. All of it. Within the time frame he specified. And how you choose to spend that money will help determine who has the deciding vote in a foundation Mr. Green created before his death. A foundation that will decide what happens to several properties in town, including Hart's Market and the old mill site. Her breath caught. Hart's Market, the old mill that developers had been circling for years. Jenna's voice echoed in her head from their last argument. Sell the house, sell the store, get out while you still can. The attorney gave her a date and time to come to his office, then offered his condolences again. When the call ended, the house felt too quiet. Lily stood in the kitchen for a long time, the words looping in her mind. Spend it all. Her money, if she could bear to use it. Now, weeks later, the month was over. Every dollar on that card had gone somewhere. To strangers, to family, to debts, to a few small, wild choices she still wasn't sure she had the right to make. Jenna had made different choices in her own mind and was ready to pounce. The foundation board waited inside, ready to listen, ready to judge. Lily looked once more at her reflection in the glass. Blonde hair pulled back, cardigan button wrong at the top, grocery name tag pinned crookedly. The same woman who had spent years scanning barcodes and swallowing her own wants. Yet something in her eyes had changed. There was fear there, yes, but also a steadiness she didn't recognize from before. This isn't just about the money, she reminded herself. It's about what I decided my life is for. She wrapped her hand around the door handle, took a breath that reached all the way down to the years she had spent putting herself last, and stepped into the room where her choices would finally be laid out under the lights. The lawyer's office sat above a bakery on Main Street, the kind of place where the hallway always smelled faintly of sugar and old carpet. Lily arrived 10 minutes early, the way she did for everything that scared her. She smoothed her thrift store blazer, checked her watch twice, and tried not to think about the way her hands had shaken when she wrote day off on the schedule at Hart's Market. A brass plaque on the door read Rowe and Parker Law. When she stepped inside, the room felt too quiet, too tidy, like someone had straightened not only the furniture, but the conversations that happened there. Daniel Rowe looked younger than his voice, with kind eyes and a tie that had been knotted a little too tight. He stood when she entered, offering his hand like they were meeting at a church potluck. Ms. Hart, thank you for coming, he said. Please sit. She perched on the chair opposite his desk, clutching her purse in both hands. On the desk lay a slim folder, a small stack of papers, and a plain white envelope with her name written in careful ink. I want to start by saying, he began, that Mr. Green spoke of you often. She blinked. He hardly talked at all. Daniel smiled faintly. Not here. But he came to see us several times over the last year. He was planning. Lily's stomach tightened. Planning what exactly? He opened the folder, revealing a card the color of wet cement, a printed contract, and several stapled pages. This, he said, tapping the card, is the prepaid debit he arranged. $100,000. It activates as soon as you sign the acknowledgement paperwork. She stared at it as if it might disappear if she blinked. Numbers from past due notices floated through her mind, trying to line up beside that impossible sum. There are conditions, he continued gently. He set them himself. Of course he did, she murmured, almost relieved. No one simply handed over that much money with no strings. You have 1 calendar month from today, Daniel said. Every transaction will be automatically logged. We'll also be asking you to keep paper receipts wherever possible. At the end of the month, the Foundation Board will review how the funds were used. The Foundation Board, she repeated. He nodded and reached for another document. Maple Street Community Foundation. Mr. Green created it 10 years ago, initially to support small local projects. Recently, he added several properties he owned personally to its portfolio. He slid a list across the desk. Her eyes moved down the page. The old hardware building, 2 modest rental houses on Birch Lane, a strip of land near the river. And then her gaze froze. Hart's Market, building and lot. Maple Mill Industrial Site, full parcel. Her throat went dry. He owned Hart's Market? The building and land, yes, Daniel said. Your family has been leasing it since your father bought the business. The mill site, too. The foundation will decide what happens to both going forward. So this money, and how I spend it, somehow connects to that. In a way, he said. The foundation has 3 voting seats. 2 are already filled. 1 by a representative of local businesses, and 1 by a representative of future development interests. He paused. The 3rd is what Mr. Green called the value seat. He wanted that vote to go to someone who understood what it meant to live close to the edge and still show up for other people. Lily frowned. I'm not a board person. I ring up groceries. Mr. Green knew that, Daniel said. That was the point. Before she could answer, the office door opened behind her. Sorry I'm late, a brisk voice announced. Parking was a nightmare. Lily turned, already recognizing the perfume before she saw the woman wearing it. Jenna stepped into the room like it belonged to her. Heel boots, perfect hair, red blazer bright as a stop sign. Her eyes widened. Lily? You're the MS, Hart, he called. Lily's fingers tightened around her purse. What are you doing here? I was Mr. Green's agent, Jenna said quickly, dropping into the chair beside her without being asked. I handled his rental agreements. We talked about his properties all the time. When he mentioned some special arrangement, I assumed. Her voice trailed off as she looked at the card on the desk. Daniel cleared his throat. Ms. Hart has been named sole beneficiary of this particular bequest, Ms. Hart. That's funny, Jenna said, flashing a tight smile. Same last name, different first name. Easy mistake. It's not a mistake, Daniel replied. Mr. Green was very specific. Jenna's smile didn't reach her eyes. So let me get this straight. My sister, who hasn't even been to a single planning meeting, gets $100,000 and a potential vote on properties I've been working around for years. It's not cash for her to keep, he said. It must be spent. The pattern of spending will help the board decide whether she is the right person to hold that 3rd seat. Mr. Green wanted to see how she handled power when it no longer went just to bills. Lily felt her face flame. I still have bills. That was his wording, Daniel added carefully. Not mine. Jenna let out a small, incredulous laugh. This town is hanging by a thread, and we're playing games with debit cards? It isn't a game, he said. It's a test of priorities. The word landed in the room with a soft thud. On the way out, Jenna caught Lily's elbow in the hallway. The sweet smell of the bakery downstairs drifted up, at odds with the sharpness in her voice. "Listen," Jenna said, keeping her tone low. "I've been talking to a developer who can actually do something with the mill and that sad little store you cling to. New jobs, new tax base, real money. If you're the one they're looking at now, you can't just throw this away." "I haven't thrown anything," Lily replied. "I only just heard about it." "Exactly." Jenna's eyes shone with frustrated energy. "You've spent years thinking small. Coupons and overtime and hand-me-downs. This is a chance to stop patching leaks and finally fix the roof." Lily heard the unspoken part. "You're the reason we've been stuck." "I have Dad to think about," she said quietly, "and the people who shop at the store." "And I have an entire future to think about," Jenna shot back. "Don't you dare act like being exhausted and broke makes you morally superior." The words stung because they brushed against something true. Lily watched her sister stalk down the stairs, red blazer flashing in and out of sight, and wondered when exactly they had stopped being girls on the same side of the same problem. That night, back at the kitchen table, the card lay between the unpaid envelopes like a foreign object. Walter dozed in his chair, his head tipped back, mouth slightly open. The evening news flickered silently on the television. She turned the card over, reading the embossed numbers, the little logo in the corner, as if it might offer instructions. Spend it. All of it. Her mind raced through wild possibilities: pay off the mortgage, hire full-time care for her father, put a down payment on a tiny condo far from Maple Street. Then she remembered Daniel's words about the foundation, the board, the vote that would outlast the money itself. She opened the first envelope. The electric bill past due. Her fingers hovered over the card. Then she set aside and reached for her checkbook instead. It felt important that the first use of this strange gift not simply be erasing what she already owed. In the morning, she made her first deliberate choice. She called the home care agency and booked 3 afternoons a week of help for Walter, paying a month in advance on the card. When she signed the slip, her hand shook, not from the amount, but from the idea that her time might finally be worth money too. On the way home, she stopped at the mechanic where an old co-worker's car had sat for weeks, waiting for a repair she couldn't afford. Lily quietly cleared the balance, asking the clerk not to mention her name. At the grocery store, she loaded the cart with staples and dropped half at the community center's food pantry, signing another receipt she would have to explain later. By the end of 2 days, the card's balance had dipped, but the world around her felt a fraction less precarious. Her father had a gentle woman to sit with him while she took a slow walk by the river. Mrs. Alvarez, from down the street, had her car keys back. The pantry shelves looked a little less bare. On the third evening, Daniel's envelope still lay unopened on the table. Finally, she slid it open and unfolded a single handwritten page. "Miss Lily, you think I don't see what you do. I do. You ring up my groceries and pretend I'm giving more than I'm getting when I drop my coins in that jar. You take a little off the total when you think I'm not looking. You go home tired and still tell that old man of yours the same story he's forgotten. I spent my life counting dollars and deeds. I know the difference between a sale and a sacrifice. This money isn't a reward. It's a mirror. I want to see what you do when you're not scraping by. Use it on people, not just numbers. Then they'll know who should be making decisions when I'm gone. H.G." The paper shook in her hands, not from fear this time, but from the sharp, strange feeling of being seen. Out in the living room, Walter stirred, calling her name. She folded the letter carefully, tucking it back into the envelope, and slid it into the drawer where she kept the important things she wasn't sure how to live with yet. The money was hers, if she could bear to spend it. But for the first time, she understood that every choice would echo beyond her own kitchen table. The news traveled faster than the receipts. By the end of the first week, people were already lowering their voices when Lily walked into the post office, the diner, the pharmacy. "That's her," someone whispered once behind her in the cereal aisle. "The one with the card." She pretended not to hear, the way she pretended not to notice the way eyes dropped to the bank envelope she carried, or the way conversations shifted when she stepped into a room. For years, she had been invisible, the woman behind the register. Now people watched what she put in her cart. She tried to move through town like nothing had changed, but everything had. The card lived in a separate section of her wallet, cool and heavy, its balance shrinking in careful steps. She set rules for herself in the quiet of the kitchen one night, pen hovering over a notepad. No paying off everything at once. No pretending the money is limitless. No spending just to make people like me. Use it on people, not just numbers, Mr. Green's letter had said. So she did, one small decision at a time. She paid 3 months back rent for the retired school secretary, whose name always seemed to be on the church prayer list. She covered a medical bill for the teenage cashier at Hart's, who had been hiding a brace under her jeans. She bought extra pallets of low-cost staples for the store and quietly marked them down so nobody would have to ask for charity out loud. Each time she signed, she felt the same mixture of relief and panic. Relief, because some weight somewhere was lifting. Panic, because she could almost hear a future voice asking, "Was this wise?" and not knowing what proof to offer beyond someone's face softening when they realized the worst was not going to happen this month. Not everyone was grateful. One man in a ball cap shoved the receipt back at her when he realized she'd quietly paid the remaining balance on his layaway. "I don't need your pity," he snapped. "It's not pity," she said, heat rising in her cheeks. "It's a neighbor helping a neighbor. Easy to say when you've got someone else's money," he shot back and walked away without the bag. That night she sat with the dwindling balance written on a scrap of paper, wondering if she had been selfish after all. So much need, and she was deciding what mattered. Who had given her that right? When she voiced this to Daniel over the phone, he listened without hurrying her. "You're not buying people," he said. "You're making visible what you already do. Only this time, someone wrote a number beside it. The board will look at patterns, not perfection." "Patterns of what?" she asked. "Of what you believe a life is for," he replied. The second week brought tension closer to home. Jenna showed up at the house one evening with takeout containers and a business folder so thick the clasp strained. "Peace offering," she said, lifting the food. "And a reality check." They ate at the kitchen table, Walter chewing slowly, watching both daughters like they were strangers he felt he ought to recognize. When he shuffled off to bed, Jenna spread papers like cards on the table. Site plans, renderings, projected revenue charts. A glossy brochure with a smiling family in front of a brick facade that looked nothing like Hart's Market. "This is what the developer is proposing," Jenna said, tapping the brochure. "Mixed-use complex. Shops, apartments, a cafe, a fitness center. New jobs. New tax revenue." "And what happens to the people who shop at Hart's now?" Lily asked. "They adapt," Jenna said. "They always do." Lily picked up one of the documents. In tiny print at the bottom, she saw a familiar parcel number that matched the mill. Another page listed Maple Retail Lot, current tenant, Hart's Market. Her stomach turned. "You've really been planning all this?" "For months," Jenna said. Before this card nonsense. The foundation was leaning toward development. This project is half the reason I've put up with committee meetings and zoning hearings. It's my shot at finally being more than the girl from the failing grocery store. And you never told me, Lily said quietly. Jenna's jaw tightened. Every time I brought up selling, you shut down. Dad can't handle change. The customers need us. The store is who we are. You made it clear what you valued. So you decided without me. Someone had to make a plan, Jenna replied. Before the ground disappeared under our feet. A few days later, the big shock came in the form of a certified letter. The envelope waited on the porch when Lily returned from the market, a bright sticker shouting her name. Inside, the foundation's crest sat at the top of the page, formal and final. The board hereby summons Ms. Lily Hart to present a detailed accounting of all expenditures from the Green Trust card on the last Friday of the month at Maple Street Community Center. The board will also hear proposals regarding the future use of the Maple Mill industrial site and the Hart's Market property. Failure to appear will be taken as forfeiture of consideration for the open foundation seat. She read it twice before noticing the second page tucked underneath. It was a copy of something she had never seen before, a memorandum of understanding between the developer and Jenna, signed 2 weeks earlier. Preliminary commission agreement, contingent upon foundation approval of sale. Her sister's looping signature sat in blue ink at the bottom, right above the developer's. Lily lowered the page slowly, the room spinning just enough to make the edges blur. Jenna hadn't just been talking to a developer. She had already tied her own future and their family's choices to a decision Lily hadn't even had a chance to make yet. The card in her wallet suddenly felt heavier than any debt she'd ever carried. Whatever she did next would not only define how an old man's money had been spent, it would decide whose vision for their lives would win. For the first time, she understood there was no way to spend this money and still keep things the same. Lily didn't feel different, but people had started treating her as if she carried an invisible clipboard everywhere she went. At Hart's Market, Mr. Jacobs from the hardware store greeted her with, "Morning, Miss Hart. Here you're sitting in with the foundation now," as if she'd suddenly grown a second title. At the diner, the waitress who used to call her Hans switched to ma'am and asked, a little too carefully, how all that important money business was going. "I still stock shelves," Lily wanted to say. "I still clip coupons." Instead, she smiled and left extra tip money on the table, wondering if that would be chalked up as kindness or carelessness when the board read her receipts. The foundation invited her to observe a planning session one Thursday evening. The meeting room smelled like stale coffee and dry erase markers. At one end of the table sat Mr. Riley from the bank, representing local businesses. At the other, Ms. Tan from the developer's office, smooth and composed in a tailored suit. "We appreciate you joining us, Ms. Hart," Riley said, shuffling papers. "Given your unique position." Unique. That was one word for it. Ms. Tan offered a polite smile. "We're all eager to hear how the funds were allocated. It will give us a sense of your perspective." "We're not reviewing the spending until the hearing," Riley reminded her, but his eyes flicked toward Lily with the same curiosity. Jenna slipped in late, cheeks flushed from the cold, portfolio tucked under her arm. She took the empty chair beside Ms. Tan without looking at Lily. Talk of revitalization and mixed-use efficiency swirled around the table. Chart after chart appeared on the screen. Projected revenue, traffic flow, improved consumer experience. It all sounded important and almost reasonable until Lily pictured Mrs. Alvarez squinting at fancy price tags or her father trying to navigate polished concrete floors with music blaring overhead. When Riley finally asked if she had any questions, she cleared her throat. "You keep saying the mill and the store lot are underutilized assets," she said, "but you never mention the people who use them now." Ms. Tan's smile didn't falter. "Our demographic studies account for current usage." "That's not what I mean," Lily said. "My father knows every crack in the sidewalk from our house to the store. If that changes overnight, he'll be lost. The folks on fixed incomes who walk because they don't drive, where do they fit into your studies?" "We understand change can be difficult," Ms. Tan replied smoothly. "But long-term progress requires looking beyond individual routines." "Those routines are people's lives," Lily said, more sharply than she meant to. Riley coughed into his hand. "We're not deciding anything tonight. Let's remember we all want what's best for Maple Street." On the walk home, Jenna caught up with her. "You're not helping," Jenna said, breath clouding in the cold air. "You sounded like you'd rather freeze time than save this town." "I sounded like I remember who lives here," Lily replied. "There's more to saving a town than new window displays." Jenna stopped under a street lamp, its yellow circle turning her hair coppery. "You think I don't care about people? I'm trying to create something that doesn't sag and leak and smell like old mop water." "The store smells like oranges and coffee," Lily said automatically. "Exactly," Jenna snapped. "You can't see how small you've let your world become." Before Lily could answer, a voice called from a porch ahead. "That you girls?" Their father stood in the doorway, sweater misbuttoned, slippers on the wrong feet. For a moment he looked like their younger selves might come skipping up the walk behind them, school bags swinging. "It's us, Dad," Lily called. "Go on back in. It's cold." He waited, stubborn as ever, until they reached the steps. "You've been fussing about that old mill again," he said, peering at them. "And the store." "We're just talking, Dad," Jenna said quickly. Walter's gaze moved between them, cloudy but intent. "Howard Green said he'd see to it. Long time ago. Told me he wouldn't let some slick outfit gut this place like they tried to do back in '85. Lily stared at him. "Back in what?" He frowned, lines deepening as he searched his memory. "When the first fellows came sniffing around the mill. Wanted to strip the machines, sell the land. They offered me a promotion if I'd go along." He chuckled without humor. "Would have moved us out of this drafty house, maybe. But your ma," she said, "what good is a new house if the whole town's hollowed out?" "Howard backed us. Said he'd remember." He shook his head, the moment slipping. "Anyway, cold out here. You girls come in." He shuffled back inside, leaving the sisters on the step with the ghost of a story hanging between them. "You never told me any of that," Lily said. "I didn't know," Jenna replied, voice softer now. "He must have been working at the mill before I was old enough to remember." Lily thought of Mr. Green's letter. "You think I don't see what you do. You ring up my groceries and pretend I'm giving more than I'm getting." And now her father's words. He wouldn't let some slick outfit gut this place. Maybe this hadn't started with her at all. Maybe she was standing somewhere in the middle of a promise made before she ever learned to count change. 2 days later, Daniel called. "We're clearing out Mr. Green's apartment," he said. "There are a few personal effects he wanted you to see, if you're willing." The apartment above Jacob's hardware felt exactly like she imagined it would. Sparse, neat in odd places, messy in others. An old recliner by the window. A tiny kitchen with 3 mismatched mugs. Stacks of newspapers, folded but unread, lined the wall. On a small table sat a battered ledger book and a sealed envelope with her name on it. Her heart beat a little faster as she picked up the ledger. Columns of numbers marched down each page, dates, amounts, notes in Mr. Green's cramped handwriting. Rent, Hart's Market discounted. Donation, Maple Food Pantry. Loan, Alvarez Auto Repair, no interest. He had been quietly propping up half the town for years, the way she had, only with more zeros. In the margin beside one entry, repair to mill office door, he had scrawled, keep this one locked. History, in there the wrong people might rewrite. Lily set the ledger down carefully and opened the envelope. Inside, on the same plain stationery as before, were a few short lines. Miss Lily, you're looking where the numbers are. Good. Look where the dust is, too. There's a metal box bolted inside the bottom drawer of the old mill office desk. Keys tapped to the back of this page. A man from the city office told the board the mill papers were all in order. They're not. Some of the story is still in that box. If they're going to carve up this town, they ought to at least read what they're cutting. You figure out what to do with it. H.G. She turned the page over. A small key was taped there, dull and ordinary, the kind of thing someone might throw in a junk drawer and forget. Someone from the city office told the board the mill papers were all in order. She remembered Ms. Tan's breezy mention at the meeting. We've reviewed all existing documentation with the city. There are no outstanding encumbrances. The confidence in her voice. The way Riley had nodded, as if that settled everything. Now here was a dead man's handwriting contradicting it outright. Lily slipped the key off the page and closed her fingers around it. It dug into her palm, tiny and sharp. For the first time, she felt something solid beneath the shifting ground of money and rumors and progress. Not just a vague sense of fairness, but a clue. A place to look. A part of the story no one had bothered to read. She tucked the letter and ledger into her bag, thanked Daniel, and stepped out into the crisp afternoon. The river wind cut through her coat, making her eyes water, but her steps felt steadier than they had in weeks. The card in her wallet still carried weight, but now there was something else on the scale. A key, a box, and the possibility that the future of Hart's Market and the mill wasn't just a negotiation between charts and construction plans. Somewhere in that locked drawer, the town's past waited to be let into the room where decisions were being made. And she was no longer sure being small was the same as being powerless. The old mill loomed at the edge of town like a memory no one had the heart to tear down. Its brick walls were stained by decades of rain and factory smoke, windows blank and dusty. A chain-link fence wrapped around it, more suggestion than barrier. The padlock on the gate had long since rusted into place. Lily parked on the gravel shoulder and sat for a moment, watching the wind tug at the weeds along the fence. She had told Daniel she was just wanting to understand the paperwork better. She had not told him about the key taped to the back of Mr. Green's letter. She slipped through a gap where the fence bowed inward, the metal scratching her coat. Inside, the air smelled of oil and dust and something older, like the inside of her father's stories. Her footsteps echoed as she crossed the empty floor, beams of light from broken windows striping the concrete. The office was a small square room raised above the factory floor, reached by a narrow metal stair. She climbed carefully, one hand on the rail, and stepped into a space frozen halfway between use and abandonment. A dented file cabinet leaned against one wall. An old desk sat under the window, its surface cluttered with faded invoices and a dry pen. The bottom drawer stuck when she tugged it, then gave with a groan. Inside lay a stack of folders and, bolted to the wood, a metal box the size of a bread loaf. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she knelt and fit the key into the lock. It turned with a reluctant click. Inside the box lay papers wrapped in plastic to keep out damp, and on top, an envelope with Hart written in strong, looping script she recognized from a ledger. She opened the envelope first. To the Hart family. Some fellows like to build monuments with their names on them. I preferred to keep the machines running and the lights on. Still, some things need writing down. When they came in '85 with their big plans and bigger mouths, they offered your Walter a way out if he'd help them gut this place. He said no. Cost him money and sleep and friends at the top. He did it anyway because he understood this town is more than land on a ledger. Your wife agreed with him, even when it meant patching that roof another winter. She looked me in the eye and said, "If we go down with our people, not on their backs." That stuck. So I did two things. I started this foundation, and I wrote it down that someone from your line ought to have a say when the next slick talkers showed up. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you proved you'll bleed with folks instead of selling them off. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And if my guess is right, they're already knocking. Don't let anyone tell you this is only about square footage. Remember who you are. H.G. Lily read the letter twice, the words blurring as old pictures rose in her mind. Her father coming home from the mill with grease on his hands. Her mother standing at the sink humming. The way worry had lived between their shoulders like a permanent tenant. She had always assumed their small life was the result of bad luck and poor choices. It had never occurred to her that no could have been a choice too, a costly one. Her throat tightened. For years she had resented the house, the bills, the narrow aisles of Hart's Market as a trap her parents left for her. Now, in a few paragraphs from a dead man, they shifted into something else. The remains of a decision to stand with people instead of profit. She set the letter aside and picked up the first sheaf of documents. Contracts, some stamped, some only signed. A supplemental covenant attached to an earlier deed. In the event the Maple Mill industrial site is repurposed or conveyed, at least one voting member of any governing body or foundation overseeing the property shall be a resident whose livelihood has been tied to Maple Street commerce for no less than 10 years and who demonstrates active commitment to the well-being of local workers and residents. At the bottom, two signatures, Howard Green and Walter Hart. So the value seat wasn't some sentimental afterthought. It had been written in from the beginning, anchored to her family's name. Another folder held copies of scholarship checks made out years ago to various young people in town. Among them, one line caught her eye. Maple Futures Scholarship recipient, Jenna Hart. Attached was a letter on foundation letterhead, congratulating Jenna on being the first in her family to pursue a real estate license and promising modest help with fees in recognition of your family's long-standing service to this community. Lily sat back on her heels, the paper rustling in her lap. Her sister, who now spoke in the language of square footage and commissions, had once walked into this very office without knowing that the foundation paying her licensing course was built partly on their parents' refusal to cash out. Jenna hadn't just clawed her way up alone. Parts of her ladder had been paid for by the man she now called my client. The last envelope held a draft amendment to the foundation charter, never filed with the city. In the margin in Mr. Green's hand, someone had written, "To be executed upon my death, assuming Hart candidate passes live fire test." The proposed language was simple. In case of deadlock or dispute, the community steward seat, chosen through an observed period of spending from a designated trust, would hold tie-breaking authority on matters directly affecting Maple Street properties. If this amendment had never been submitted, the board might not even know this option existed. The test was the card in her wallet. Her month of choices had not been a moral riddle for its own sake. It had been his way of deciding who should carry the vote he'd meant to assign years earlier. Lily leaned her forehead against the edge of the desk, letting the facts settle. Her father had given up security to keep the mill alive. Her mother had agreed. Mr. Green had watched and built a safety net in legal language and quiet gifts. He had helped Jenna step into real estate, betting that someone from their family might stand on both sides of the counter one day. And now here they were, one sister clinging to the familiar, one sister racing toward transformation, both standing on floorboards their parents had refused to sell. For the first time, Lily saw their fights for what they were, not good versus bad, but two different answers to the same ache. We can't live like this forever. Jenna wanted out. Lily wanted meaning. Their parents had tried to choose both and ended up with neither in full. She closed her eyes and asked herself the question that had been humming under everything since the card arrived. If this is my turn at the wheel, what do I believe a life is for? The answer came not as a slogan, but as small images. Mrs. Alvarez handing over a few dollar bills without embarrassment. The teenage cashier standing up a little straighter when her medical bill disappeared. Her father tracing his way down the cracker aisle by touch. Maybe she didn't know how to build a monument, but she knew how to keep a place from making people feel small. By the time she left the mill, her plan was still more feeling than script, but its outline had taken shape. At the hearing, she wouldn't argue in charts. She would lay out the receipts like stepping stones and tell the stories behind them, not to prove she was generous, but to show what Green's money had actually touched. Then she would bring out the letters, the covenant, the unfiled amendment, not as a weapon, but as history. If the board chose development after hearing all that, at least it would be an honest choice, not one made on half the facts and glossy brochures. That night, she called Jenna. "We need to talk," she said. "I'm busy," Jenna replied, rustle of papers in the background. "I've got a site visit in the morning." "This can't wait," Lily said. "It's about the mill. And about you." Silence, then a sigh. "Fine. Tomorrow. My office." The next day, Lily sat across from her sister at a glass-topped desk that reflected their faces back at them, older and more tired than the last time they'd shared a room without their father between them. She slid the scholarship letter across the desk. "You remember this?" Jenna glanced at it, then blinked. I remember the scholarship. I didn't realize it was connected to the foundation. Daniel handled most of the details." "He didn't just pay your fees out of nowhere," Lily said gently. "You were part of this long before the developer ever came to town." Then she showed her the covenant, the letter about their parents, the draft amendment. Jenna read in tight silence. When she finished, she pushed back her chair and walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. "So he was using you," she said at last, voice brittle. "Testing you. Testing all of us." "He was trusting us," Lily said. "The way he trusted Dad back then." "He trusted you," Jenna shot back. "I was just some kid who wanted out badly enough to sell houses to strangers." "That scholarship says different," Lily replied. "He thought you'd matter in how this town changed." "I think you do too." Jenna pressed her forehead against the glass. "Do you know what it's like to sit in rooms where everybody assumes you're temporary? I had one shot to be taken seriously. This deal is it. I can't go back to being the girl whose dad bags groceries at his own store." "He was a mill worker," Lily said quietly, before he chose not to sell the place out from under people. The store was Plan B. Jenna laughed once, without humor. So what? I'm the one breaking the family streak if I sign a contract. You're the one who forgot why the streak exists, Lily answered, not unkindly. They were quiet for a long moment, both breathing in the distance years had put between them. I'm not going to stand up there and burn you, Lily said finally. At the hearing. That's not what this is about. But I am going to tell the whole story. About the mill. About Dad. About this money. About what it's done these past weeks. And if the board listens to you? Jenna asked, turning back. If they side with you and your little receipts instead of a multi-million-dollar development, then the town keeps more than a new coat of paint, Lily replied. And you'll still be good at your job. People will still need honest agents who know what walls are hiding. And if they don't, Jenna pressed, then at least I'll know I didn't stay quiet to make it easier on everyone else, Lily said. I'm tired of living the consequences of decisions nobody said out loud. Jenna looked at her for a long time, eyes searching. You really think your month of playing fairy godmother is going to outweigh all this? She gestured at the neat rows of binders on her shelves. I don't know, Lily admitted. But I think Mr. Green believed that how we treat each other when we finally have a little room to breathe says more about us than what we do when we're desperate. I'd like to think he was right. When Lily left the office, the air outside felt sharp and clean. She walked home without looking at the card balance even once. For the first time since the phone call, she understood that the money had done something to her that would last longer than any receipt. It had forced her to choose a story to stand in. She chose this one, a life measured not by square footage or status, but by whether the people around her could still recognize themselves in the places they called home. The hearing at the community center was coming. The board, the developer, the town, Jenna, they would all have their say. So would she. And when the lights came up and the papers were spread out, the old mill's quiet, dusty truths would finally be in the room too. When Lily finally stepped through the community center doors, the room felt smaller than it had from the hallway. Folding chairs faced a long table where the foundation board sat. Mr. Riley with his stack of papers, two other members, whose names she kept forgetting, and Daniel at the end. Legal pad ready. On one side of the room, Ms. Tan and her team had set up glossy poster boards showing bright renderings of Maple Mill Plaza. On the other, familiar faces crowded together. Mrs. Alvarez, the teenage cashier, Mr. Jacobs from the hardware store, volunteers from the food pantry. Jenna sat near the front in her red blazer, portfolio at her feet, eyes sharp and unreadable. Riley tapped his microphone. We're here to review the expenditures from the Green Trust card and to hear proposals for the future of the Maple Mill site and Hart's Market. Ms. Hart, Ms. Tan, Ms. Hart, he added with a glance at Jenna, we appreciate your cooperation. Ms. Tan went first. She spoke in smooth phrases about revitalization, anchor tenants, increased tax base. Her slides showed tidy storefronts and happy shoppers, a version of Maple Street that looked like it had stepped out of a brochure. When she finished, a few people clapped politely. Others stared at their hands. Then Jenna rose. Her voice had the confident cadence Lily had heard in her commercials, but she kept glancing at her sister as if measuring every word. I grew up in that store, Jenna said. I know its leaks, its quirks, its limits. For years, we've watched it struggle. This redevelopment is a chance to bring in new life, new opportunity. We can't cling to the past forever. Her gaze swept the room. Yes, it will be different. But different doesn't have to mean worse. Sometimes it means finally being able to breathe. she sat down to a murmur of mixed approval and unease. "Ms. Lily Hart," Riley said. "Your turn." Lily stood, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes settle on her. Her knees wanted to knock, but her hands were steady as she carried a small box to the table and set it down. Inside, clipped in tidy bundles, were the receipts. "I'm not a planner or a developer," she began. "I'm a cashier. I count what people can afford every day. When Mr. Green gave me this money," she glanced at Daniel, "and called it a test, I didn't understand what he was really asking." She opened the box and took out the first bundle. "This," she said, holding up a faded slip, "is from the home care agency. 3 afternoons a week for my father, prepaid for a month. It gave me time to think about more than just the next crisis. It let me walk by the river for the first time in years. It also kept me from collapsing on your doorstep instead of standing here." A few chuckles rippled through the room, gentle, knowing. She lifted another bundle. "This covers Mrs. Alvarez's car repair. Without it, she would have lost her job and probably her apartment. Now she still buys her bread at Hart's like she has for 20 years. Mrs. Alvarez dabbed at her eyes and nodded. She moved through the stack, not reading every item, but choosing moments. The teenage cashier's medical bill, extra pallets of staples for the store, a quiet rent payment for the retired school secretary, stocked shelves at the pantry. "I didn't always get it right," she admitted. "Some folks didn't want help. Some choices still keep me up at night. But when I looked at this card, I didn't see a way out. I saw a chance to prove that if you finally give someone like me room to breathe, I'll use that air to keep other people breathing too." She set the last bundle down, the box now nearly empty. "That's the pattern," she said simply. "Not perfection. Just a list of where my heart went when the numbers stopped choking me." Riley cleared his throat. "And how do you believe this relates to the Foundation's mission for the properties?" She took a breath. "I used to think my parents had just failed," she said, "that they'd settle for small. But Mr. Green left more than money." She pulled the ledger and letters from her bag and laid them on the table. The room leaned forward as Daniel's eyebrows shot up in recognition. "These documents were in a locked box at the mill office," she said. "He left me a key." She read aloud from the letter about 85, about the first developers, about her father turning down a promotion so the town wouldn't be gutted. She read the covenant tying the value seat to someone rooted in Maple Street commerce. She read the line, "Not because you're better than anyone, but because you proved you'll bleed with folks instead of selling them off." Murmurs stirred in the chairs behind her. Walter, sitting between two neighbors, straightened as if some distant memory was tugging at his sleeve. "Mr. Green didn't build this foundation to make a prettier brochure," Lily said. "He built it so that when this day came, someone at this table would remember that the town is more than its square footage." She handed the draft amendment to Daniel. "And this," she added, "is what he meant to add." Daniel scanned it, his face changing as he read. Riley leaned over his shoulder. The other board members clustered closer. Ms. Tan stepped forward. "If that amendment was never filed, it has no legal." "It was filed," Daniel interrupted quietly. I didn't know." He looked faintly stunned. "The city clerk's office received it 6 months ago, with instructions to make it effective upon Mr. Green's death and verification of the Steward test." A woman in a gray blazer near the back raised her hand. "That's correct," she said. "Sandra Lewis, city clerk. We have a stamped copy on file." A ripple went through the room. The final twist landed almost gently. Riley adjusted his glasses. "So if I'm reading this right," he said, tapping the page, "Mr. Green created a condition. If the steward uses the majority of their funds to stabilize local residents and small businesses, rather than for personal luxury or removal from the area, they automatically assume the community steward seat, with tie-breaking authority on Maple Street properties. Daniel nodded slowly. That's the language. He picked up Lily's receipt summary, which he himself had helped tally. 83% of Ms. Hart's expenditures went to other residents, small businesses, or community services, he said. 10% to stabilizing her own home so she could keep caring for her father. 7% to modest improvements like replacing a broken fridge and fixing a leaking roof. No luxury purchases. No relocation costs. He looked at Lily, then at the board. By the terms of the amendment, she qualifies. Silence settled, dense and fragile. Ms. Tan's expression tightened. So a month of ad hoc charity outweighs years of planning? What kind of precedent? It's the precedent Mr. Green chose, Riley said, not unkindly. We're bound by the charter he left. He turned to Lily. Ms. Hart, if you accept, you will hold the community steward seat, including tie-breaking authority on these properties. Do you accept that responsibility? Lily thought of her parents' cramped kitchen, of Mr. Green's quiet nods at the checkout line, of Jenna's restless ambition, of her father tracing his way by memory to Hart's Market. Yes, she said, on one condition of my own. Riley's brows rose. Which is? That we stop talking like the only options are tear it down or leave it to rot, she answered. The mill can be converted into something that still belongs to the people who kept this town alive. Affordable apartments, a community center, small workspace. The store can get the repairs it needs without pricing out the people who built their lives around it. We use the foundation funds to modernize without erasing. We write it down so no one has to find another dusty box in 20 years. She glanced at Jenna. And if my sister is willing, we use her talent for seeing what a building can be to help us do it right, even if it doesn't come with the commission she was promised. All eyes shifted to Jenna. She sat very still, fingers resting on the scholarship letter Lily had slid her earlier. For a moment, the distance between them felt as wide as it had ever been. Then she exhaled, long and shaky. The commission agreement is contingent on the sale, she said quietly. If there is no sale, there is no commission. She looked at Ms. Tan. I'll withdraw my representation on this project. Ms. Tan's lips pressed into a thin line. You're making a mistake. Maybe, Jenna replied. But if I keep selling pieces of this place out from under people who trust in my family, I'm not sure what I'd be building on anyway. She turned to Lily. I'll help. No fee. Just a say in how it looks when we're done. Something in Lily's chest unclenched. The sweet sting of justice spread through the room, not the glee of a win, but the deep relief of something finally being made honest. Riley cleared his throat. All in favor of adopting Ms. Hart's proposal for the mill and market, guided by the original foundation mission, and with Ms. Lily Hart as community steward? Hands went up around the table. Ms. Tan stayed firmly down. Opposed? He asked out of habit. One opposed, he noted. Motion carries. Ms. Hart's seat breaks the tie in favor of the motion. A quiet cheer rose from the back of the room. Mrs. Alvarez actually hooped. Walter clapped slowly, then faster, eyes bright for once. Later, when the hall had emptied and the posters had been folded away, Lily and Jenna stood on the community center steps, the evening air cool on their faces. So, Jenna said, hugging her blazer to herself, "You're a board member now." "So are you in a way," Lily answered. "Someone has to help me understand what half those terms mean." They shared a tired laugh. "I'm sorry," Jenna said after a moment, "for signing that agreement behind your back, for acting like wanting more meant I was the only one who mattered." "I'm sorry I made you feel like wanting more was betrayal," Lily replied. "I learned today that our whole life wasn't just being stuck. It was Mom and Dad making hard choices I didn't give them credit for. Maybe we've both been angry at the wrong people." They stood quietly, letting that truth settle between them like a new kind of truce. In the months that followed, scaffolding wrapped around the old mill as crews carefully opened it up not to strip it, but to carve light and space for a community center and simple apartments. Hart's Market got a new roof and brighter lights, but the aisles stayed narrow enough for old hands to find their way by touch. Lily attended more meetings than she ever thought possible, learning to read budgets and plans, to ask questions about ramps and rent caps and bus routes. She still worked shifts at the store, still checked on her father's pills, but there was a steadiness in her step now that came from knowing she wasn't just reacting to life anymore. She was shaping a small corner of it. Jenna's for lease signs began appearing on storefronts with handwritten notes beneath them. Priority for local businesses. She still wore bright blazers, still talked quickly and dreamed big, but she spent more time listening in church basements and less time in glossy conference rooms. One afternoon, Lily watched from the doorway as Walter shuffled slowly down the cereal aisle of the newly painted market, hand grazing the familiar shelves. He paused, smiled, and murmured, "Still here," as if to himself. "Yes," Lily said softly, "we are." The money was long gone by then, scattered into car repairs and medical bills and canned goods and new shingles. But what it had bought remained. A mill that remembered who worked in it, a store that still smelled of oranges and coffee, a town that had chosen to grow without forgetting its own face. For Lily, the real inheritance wasn't the card or even the foundation seat. It was the answer she had finally given herself to the question that had haunted every bill and every long shift. A life is for more than surviving. It's for taking whatever you're given, coins or cards or keys, to dusty drawers, and using it in a way that lets other people stand a little straighter when they say, "I live here." That, she decided, was a kind of wealth no one could ever quietly sign away.